Imagine for a second that you're a parent and your kid gets sick and has a fever. And you're measuring it every half hour, and it's 100, and it's 101, and it's 102, and at 103 you call the doctor. At 104, doctor says, maybe you want to go to the emergency room. And then it keeps spiking. It goes to 105, 106. It gets to 108, it's game over. So that's basically what's happening to this planet. Not happening as fast as it happens to your baby, but this is what's happening to the planet. So if you take average temperatures 1850, 1970s, 1980s, 2003 is off the charts. Right? They're having to create new y-axes for these things. And as you think about the consequences of that, what we're doing is we're putting the heat equivalent of 400,000 Hiroshima bombs into the atmosphere and the water every day. And why does that matter? Well, that matters because of what happened in Acapulco about a month ago. So you had a nice tropical storm. All the meteorology models said tropical storm. People put away their umbrellas. And then it hit that little patch of hot water. And hot water is like turbo fuel for hurricanes. And so what ended up happening is within 2 hours, it had gone to Category 2. Within 8 hours, it had gone to Category 5. And it wiped out 1 million people. Just took out that whole city. Well, this is coming to a city near you because of the way you've been heating the oceans. So my challenge and my wish today is I want you to start thinking big. I want you to start thinking at scale. And that means changing the engineering specs. So if you have an engineer that graduates from MIT, and you tell that engineer, hey, build me this, call it a tent, the tent will get built, right? And if you say, actually, build me a house, the types of construction, the materials, will be very different. If you say, build me a city, you're talking about a completely different kind of infrastructure. So engineering specs really matter for what you want to build and what you tell your engineers to do. What are we telling engineers today? We're telling them, lower the emissions on the planet, on existing emissions, by 50% in the next 7 years, lower them to 0 by 2050. Necessary, but not sufficient. You have to do something completely different. You have to have a new climate standard which says 0 emissions by 2050, but you have to lower the temperature of the planet because it's too damn high. The thermostat has to come down. That requires a complete rethink of the engineering specs of what we're doing, because it's not just mitigating what we're doing, it's lowering the temperature of the planet. That is not a small issue. I would like you to use physics to do this, not biology, right? Because if we go and we engineer, I know a little bit about genomics, I know a little bit about synthetic biology. We can engineer bugs that go out and do stuff in the ocean. But if it becomes a kudzu problem, you can't stop it. You don't want to screw around with biology on this stuff. So let's use physics. So what does it mean to use physics? Well, light, basically coming from that thermonuclear sun, are a series of billiard balls, photons, that hit the Earth all day long, right? And every time they hit the Earth, they increase the heat content. So what you've got to do is you've got to lower the amount of photons hitting the Earth. 3 ways to do that, 3 strategies. One is do what an eclipse does. You've all been in eclipses, right? Gets a little bit colder, gets darker. All right, so there are people out there who are thinking about how do you build a blanket that's 100,000 square kilometers at a reasonably stable point between the sun and the Earth. Let's leave that to the rocket boys, because you need about a throw weight of 50 kilograms. We're nowhere close to that. But we do have the Earth. And the really surprising thing about the Earth is the atmosphere is about as thick as the skin on this apple. Right? We think of the atmosphere as, way up there, and we think we're way up there in a jet plane. No, it's about the thickness of the skin on this apple. And so when you're thinking about engineering that, a couple of ways to do it. So 10 to 50 kilometers up, stratosphere, you can put stuff up into the stratosphere. And by the way, we know it works, because when you had a big volcanic eruption in the 1960s at Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines, that put a whole lot of ash up there. And that lowered the temperature of the planet for 3 years, depending on where you were, between 0.2 and 0.7 degrees centigrade. Now, that looks like a lot of stuff, but it actually doesn't look like that much from space. So it doesn't take that much ash, that much material, to lower the temperature of the planet. Now, there's a small problem with that. Because it's got things like sulfur in it, it does away with the ozone layer, which is not good. So we need to put a different kind of material up there. And we don't know what kind of material to put up there. And that is a real problem. We need to find that out. We need to find that out quick. The other way to do this is to increase the brightness of marine clouds. So ironically, in lowering the pollution on the oceans, we're also warming them faster. But you can build ships, and there are folks like these folks, who are thinking about how do you put nanoparticles of water up into the atmosphere, brighten the clouds, and reduce the amount of photons hitting the water. Don't screw around with the stratosphere. That's too dangerous. You hear that a lot. Well, guess what, kids? We've already changed it 12 to 15 times what would be naturally occurring. So we've got to apply a Pottery Barn rule. You break it, you buy it. We actually happen to be in a climate emergency. The person I most respect on climate change, James Hansen, he came out with a paper that's the single scariest paper I have ever read. And the argument in this paper is we have baked in basically 8 to 10 degrees centigrade. That's an extinction level event for humanity. That means geoengineering may not be a choice. So as you're thinking about this stuff, you also have to understand the stuff is accelerating. That the energy imbalance, how much heat comes into the Earth and how much heat goes out, is increasing. In fact, 2x in 20 years. So not only is it getting hotter faster. So here's my big idea. Here's a proposal. You would not go and work in an office building that did not have sprinklers and emergency exits. You would not have a house that doesn't have fire extinguishers and some sort of a sprinkler system inside it. We have not built that sprinkler system for the Earth, and we need to build that. So we need to listen very carefully when folks like Danny Hillis come out and say, hey, you've got to explore chalk, because maybe you put chalk up there. You've got to look very carefully when groups like Silver Lining come out and say, here's an agenda for the next 3 years, except that you've got to accelerate that. I hope we don't have to use this stuff. I hope we don't have to geoengineer. But it would be crazy to bet most of life on Earth, including human life, because we don't want to build fire extinguishers, because we don't want to build sprinklers. And that means geoengineering. And it's scary, and it doesn't mean that the oil companies get a free pass. It doesn't mean that all of you working on mitigation, on solutions. I'm actually an optimist. Because when I look at the solar curves and I look at the wind curves and everything else, we are going to get to net zero. We are going to get to much cheaper energy. But it's going to take us 20 to 30 years, and we need a bridge in those 20 to 30 years so that all of you can implement these solutions. And that bridge may have to require putting stuff into the atmosphere. We have to build those planes now. We have to build those balloons now. And if we don't do that, we may be betting all life on Earth. Thank you.